Here we have the Tesla weekly chart. I'm just going to be taking a look at where this move started and how far it can go. Is it going to be coming back down, or does it still have a lot more room to go? So this is the weekly chart here. And as you can see, we had this pretty mad rip upwards that started around the $420 mark and reached very close to 1,000, and now we're sitting back on around 740. So before we look at where this stock could eventually go, I think it's important to first ask yourself the question of why did this move start in the first place? So if we look at Tesla going back a couple of years, you can see that it was actually ranging here. It's been actually ranging in a fairly stable way. So let's say between 2014 and 2019, the stock price has fluctuated between about just under $200 and just shy of $400. Now, that doesn't make too much sense because back in 2014, they had barely started. The IPO was only a couple of years before, and they were selling very, very few cars. Whereas in 2019, they were already much, much bigger with huge sales. They'd launched a Model 3, they'd launched so much new stuff. So either here it was massively underpriced, or over here it was massively overpriced, or a bit of both. Personally, I've been buying Tesla since about 2015, 2016, because I kept thinking that it was more and more underpriced and also a, let's say, misunderstood stock. And I think that takes us to the current breakout, which I think is mostly due to the fact that for the last 4 to 5 years, Tesla has been artificially suppressed. So as you probably heard, it's been the most shorted stock on the market. And the more it gets shorted, the more selling pressure there is. So that keeps the price down artificially. And I think it's been fighting to find some new upside for a very long time. And when it finally managed to break through, as we said, around here, around $400, all of that accumulated power was acted as a kind of coil and has just exploded upwards. So I don't think it's an unjustified move, even though it looks very unreasonable, but it looks that way because it was unreasonably shorted. So when you're trying to decide whether you should sell it or hold on or buy, one thing to always bear in mind is that most people have a very strong psychological bias when looking at charts like this, which is along the lines of it's come up so high, it must be due for a correction, or it must come back down. There's absolutely no basis for that in reality. If it does become overbought, yes, it will correct a bit like it did here. But if you look at stocks that have grown and grown and grown over the years, they don't go back down. Like, think of Facebook, Apple, or even smaller names. You know, they start from just a few dollars and they climb and climb and climb and split and keep climbing. And so we can kind of compare this move to the Tesla move back after the IPO. It definitely resembles what's happening now. So the stock had been trading under $40 since the IPO, basically. And then it very quickly tripled, which is similar to what we've witnessed now. It was trading at 400. We've approached nearly 1,000, something in that ballpark. Here it's the same thing. It was trading around 40, very quickly blasted up to 80. But then there's no real reason to think that it's going to come down again if the reason it has gone up is valid. That is the main question. And as you can see, it just kept going up, reached 180, so over a 4x. And then, yeah, it came back down a little bit, but not because it had gone up too much, but simply because it was finding a new trading range, which is then the one that it stayed in for quite a few years. So if we compare that movement to the current move, which is over here, I mean, the stock, it can move differently when it is more mature. So I think the 2013 explosion in price should most likely be more dramatic than here, although that's not necessarily true. I'm not surprised to see it go from 400 to nearly 1,000, and after this correction down to 745, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see it keep climbing up past 1,000 or even 2,000. And while those might seem crazy numbers, they're not really. And they're not really crazy because, having done a bit of technical analysis here, if you actually think about the underlying fundamentals, Tesla often gets compared to other automakers to make it look unfavorable. So people say, Toyota is worth a similar amount, somewhere in the ballpark, but they sold 10 times or 100 times as many cars. But that's kind of missing the point, because Toyota, yes, it's just an automaker. Tesla is not just an automaker. Tesla is fundamentally a technology company and a power company. And whereas Toyota doesn't really have much of a future trajectory, it can keep going as it is or improve slightly, Tesla does have a huge potential market. If we assume that all cars are going to be electric in the foreseeable future, Tesla has a huge head start on that. And then when you add Solar City and all the other things that they're doing, like the Power Pack and numerous other things, the autonomous driving, how that could impact taxis and Ubers and that kind of business, it's really very hard to estimate how big that could be. So there is a lot of upside, and you have to take the predicted growth and future revenues and profits of the company and discount it back to today's value. And obviously that's always going to be an estimate and a guess, but Tesla does have at least the potential for a huge upside. So I don't see it as unjustified. And when you think of a company from a fundamental point of view, I mean, it's just insane. If you look at the Model 3, that was the biggest product launch ever in history. So the day they launched it, they had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of reservations, and within, I think it was a few months, 400,000 cars reserved, and without even spending a single dollar on advertising. And that is just insane. And I think whenever you have a product like that people absolutely adore, like the launch of the iPhone, it just sells itself, and it's not going anywhere. Like, nobody is stopping that. And if you are in doubt, like, just go and drive a Tesla. Go and test drive one. Once you've driven a Tesla and you go back to an internal combustion engine car, you just literally feel like it's a horse, as Elon Musk says. There's just absolutely no comparison. It's kind of like going back in time to someone with their old clunky phone and giving them a smartphone. You're just going to absolutely blow their mind. And one of the other reasons that convinced me to start investing in Tesla back in quite a few years ago now was that I happened to read Elon Musk's biography. And that's something that, if you read it, not only is it a great read, but you kind of realize that whatever this man is doing, you should not bet against him, because he started from nothing and he built a company called Zip2, which is kind of like a early online address indexing company thing, a bit like an early Google Maps or Yelp type thing, which he then sold. And with the millions from that, he made PayPal. He made PayPal, that's insane as well. Then from the billions he got from PayPal, he made Tesla. And Tesla is just a part of it. He's also made, I still can't quite wrap my head around it. He's made SpaceX. Like, here's one man who hasn't even studied rockets before, and it just single-handedly decimates the price of rockets, makes them reusable, makes decades of advancements, compared to NASA that has like unlimited funding, all of the brightest minds. It's really insane. So once you realize what he can do and what he's capable of, even if you don't understand or believe what he's doing, I think it's wise at least not to bet against him. So it's tricky to try and figure out how high the price could actually go. But personally, if we take the current market cap, so the total value of the company, which today is about 140 billion, something like that, and compare it to a company like Apple, which is currently 1.4 trillion, so 10 times as big. Now, if Tesla becomes what I think it's going to become, and there's a probability that it will, a probability that it won't, but I just back what Elon Musk does based on his track record. If it does become that, it's going to be at least as valuable as Apple. If they dominate not only the car market, but even the taxi market, they've made the semis, it has so many repercussions in industry, like the whole transportation industry, right? This could be worth way more than $1 trillion. But let's say conservatively, right, that it could end up being as big as Apple. That is still a 10x that is remaining in the price. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen like overnight. Maybe it'll take 5 years, 10 years, however long it takes for people to switch to electric cars for the most part. But that means that if you have a 10x in the market cap, that the shares still have a potential 10x as well. Like, obviously they're going to split along the way, but ultimately they would be worth potentially at 7k each as a kind of ballpark. And if you look at ARK Invest's projections, they have something similar. I think initially they had a 2.4k projection, and then they pushed it up a bit. But it's that kind of order of magnitude, or at least, put it this way, at least it's going up. Even if it doesn't get to that point, it still has a lot of growth. There's no reason to believe that it's going to slow down. And sometimes the stock market does have deviations. Well, often it has deviations from the true value. So I definitely think that, let's say back here when it was at 180, this was massively undervalued. You can argue that maybe right now up here it's overvalued, but the real value is somewhere in the middle, and the trajectory is definitely up. So personally, I'm still trading Tesla stock in and out, but when I see opportunities for it, but mostly I'm also holding the stock for the long term.